And Brian is coming to us from New Orleans, or as some might say, Nolans, maybe. And Brian is a past district governor. He served in the 2014-15 Rotary year. And even before that time and since that time, he has been involved at some really high level Rotary initiatives, including serving on the host committee of 2 Rotary International Conventions, 2011, and then this last one that we were supposed to go to in Honolulu. Brian has also been very active as an assistant Rotary Public Image Coordinator and an assistant Rotary Foundation coordinator. He's currently serving as the End Polio Now coordinator. He's one of those people who is just so excited and enthusiastic about Rotary and is so skilled in everything he does. I had the good fortune to spend 26 straight days with Brian at the Rotary International Assembly. Brian was my support training leader, and God bless him for being there in case anything happened and I couldn't serve. He was there to support me, and I know when I see a good thing, and I was not about to let a good thing pass us by. So I reached out to Brian, asked him to be with us today, and here he is. So Brian, I'm going to turn it over to you. We're in your hands. You tell us what you want us to do throughout your presentation. And as John said, he and I will help support you in any way.
Awesome, Una. Thank you so much for that introduction. And it was altogether my pleasure to serve as your support training leader. As you well know, I had the easiest job in the world. I mean, you were always there, and you were just spot on time. I had nothing to do. Una made it as easy as you possibly could make a job like that to be. So it's my pleasure to be with you guys here this evening. And we're going to talk about strategic planning a little bit. And I love strategic planning because I think there's so much power in sitting down and considering what strategic planning can do, what it can do for your club, what it can do for a district, frankly. And when you sit and you think about it, you know, normally strategic planning takes course over a period of time. And what is one of the magical things that you can do by virtue of strategic planning? That is change the culture of your club. You know, if you're in a situation where the culture in your club is not what you would like it to be, there are other things that you would like to see your club embrace. There is one secret massive ingredient that you've got to have when it comes to building culture, and that's time. You know, if you don't pay attention to the culture that you're building in your club, it's going to build a culture anyway. It is going to default to a culture. And so by strategic planning, you can actually consider what you want the culture of your club to be, and you can actually turn it into what you would like it to be. One of the great things about strategic planning is it can rescue a dying club. If you're a club that's on the rope, or if you know a club that's on the ropes, then certainly strategic planning can be one way that you find your way out of that. And we're going to do a couple of case studies. I want to read through a couple of case studies, maybe talk about them a little bit. And one of those will be that type situation. And strategic planning can help to get those clubs off the ropes and back to being a solid club. And obviously, if you're a good club, strategic planning can make you a great club. So let's talk for a couple of minutes about what strategic planning is. And one thing that I like to do, and this is a lot of this, you're going to have the benefit of Brian's thinking tonight, right? And I'm not going to warrant that it is correct. I am just going to warrant to you that it is Brian's thinking. So how is strategic planning the same thing as visioning? And in my world, it is not. And so when you stop and you think about the concept of visioning, and you get a group of people together, you get your club, you perhaps spend an evening, maybe half a day going through a visioning process and imagining what you want your club or your district to be over the next 3, 4, 5 years. Strategic planning is the steps that you put together to get you from where you are to where that vision is. And so it's one thing to sit and envision what the club might be. It is another thing to sit and put together the process of getting you from here to there. Strategic planning is a blueprint for action and change. That is exactly what it is. It is your blueprint for moving forward. And then, of course, inside that strategic plan are going to be the little nuts and bolts things that you do to make sure that that vision comes to fruition, that you get from here to there. So, with that said, does a strategic plan require visioning? Yeah, it does, of some sort, right? Because you've got to know where you're wanting to go to before you lay out the strategic plan. Now, does that visioning have to be formal? No, is the answer to that too in my world. Sometimes you're going to be in a situation where formal visioning just isn't really possible. But you sit down and you pull together that strategic plan that will move you forward in the direction that you know you need to go. And as a corollary to that question is, are all clubs at a place where formal visioning would be useful? And the answer there, of course, is a resounding no. There are some clubs that frankly are facing such issues that pulling together the whole club and pulling together a vision of what that club might be like in 5 years can be really challenging. There's a quote from Steve Jobs, the past CEO of Apple, who passed away a few years ago. I love this quote. He said, "Some people say give the customers what they want, but that's not my approach. Our job is to figure out what they're going to want before they do. I think Henry Ford once said, if I had asked customers what they wanted, they would have told me a faster horse. People don't know what they want until you show it to them. That's why I never rely on market research. Our task is to read things that are not yet on the page." And so you're going to find yourself involved with clubs sometimes. Maybe it is your club where if you sat down with the whole club and began to try to craft a vision for where you're going, and then that strategic plan, that vision would involve only what they know. And that knowledge may be so limited in that room that you don't have a good visioning process going on. And at that point in time, maybe you pull aside some leaders, maybe you step aside and you have a subset of the club who will begin to craft that vision for you and then to lay out the strategic plan to get you from here to there. So let's take a few minutes. I want to take a few minutes and go over a case study with you guys. I'm going to drop it in chat so you guys can open it up. Let's see. There we go. So it should be available to you in chat. What I'd like you to do is take about 2 or 3 minutes and read this, this case study, and then let's talk about what's in it. I feel like I should have that Jeopardy music playing.
Brian, I'm not seeing this. It's Bill Minsker. I don't have anything other than your picture.
Oh, you don't?
I just put it in the I just put it in the chat.
Okay. Yeah, it should be available to you in the chat.
Let's see.
I can add a link as well. That's not a problem.
I just started it. I cut and pasted, and I'm going to cut and paste the second part because it limited my characters.
There's a link directly to the document as well. That should work for you.
I got it. Thank you.
Good. Oh, there you go. All right, about 30 seconds. We'll start talking about it. So tell me, what do you think of Anytown Rotary Club? Is this a club destined for glory? Probably not. Yeah. In chat, why don't you indicate to me, do you think this is a club that's ready for formal visioning? Maybe I should have asked if anybody thinks this is a club that's ready for formal visioning. That might have been the better way to ask that question. No. Yeah, this is not a club that's ready for formal visioning. But let me ask you this now. If we're sitting and we're looking at this club, if you were the president-elect, who would you pull in for the visioning process and the strategic planning process? John, I'm available via Zoom. Yep, so we've got district leaders, we've got PI consultant, some new members, a leader from another club. Let's see, and actually I see Bill Minsker said they need formal visioning. There is some truth to that. I see we've got an answer here, the next presidents, the presidential line. What's the benefit? And if you sit and you think about this situation this club is in, as the case study mentions, on the positive side of the ledger, they've got future leadership lined up. And when you begin that strategic planning process with the future leaders lined up, you're pretty much guaranteed that you're going to be able to follow this thing through. You've got buy-in from the future, right? So that's not a bad thing to have in your corner. And let me ask this too, and I'll even throw this open. You can unmute your mic, maybe raise your hand. What elements would your strategic plan have in it? What would you expect to achieve as part of your strategic plan?
A plan for membership growth and attracting younger members.
Yeah. A service project in chat. What else might it include? See,
Considering new locations.
What was that, Una?
Considering new locations.
Yeah, a new location.
I think they need to get their finances in check.
Yes. Yeah, that would be a nice first step, wouldn't it? Fiscal stability, district involvement, member engagement. We've got member involvement again, sense of ownership. To what community programs can the club contribute its available funding? That's a great question. How can you plug into the community and begin to do that? A SWOT analysis again, a plan for the sale of the house. I find that really interesting. That detail came out. That's an interesting one, a plan for the sale of the house. And so as we sit and we look at this club, I think all of us can agree that there are ways for this club to begin to move forward, but there are a lot of problems that this club has to address before a formal visioning process, in my opinion, would be incredibly useful. You've got future leaders, you've got district leaders, you've got a lot of people that this club can bring on board to help them move through this process. But at the end of the day, that club's got to own it and be ready to move forward. Any questions or comments about this? Would you want to be in this club? Yeah, I see a lot of smiles that say no. Yeah, no, yeah, probably not exactly your perfect Rotary Club situation. So that is a bad situation. That's a good example of a bad situation that we wouldn't want to find ourselves in. I want to do one more case study, and then we'll talk about the two of them jointly. I have just added, and I'll add a link as well. I've just added the second one to the chat. Let me get the link here. There we go. All right. And there is a link to the file as well. Again, take about 2 or 3 minutes and read this case study, and let's talk about the differences between the clubs.
Not sure what I did, but it's doing something weird.
And Una is putting the text into chat as well, if you would rather do it that way. About 30 seconds and we'll talk about this one as well. So let's call this one Other Town Rotary Club. I had Any Town up at the beginning, but to separate the two, we'll call this Other Town Rotary Club. What do you think about this club? Is this club ready for formal visioning? Yeah, you got a pretty educated member base at this point in time. You've got people who know what's going on. You've got some buy-in to district programs. You've got buy-in to Rotary Foundation programs. You've got youth exchange. You've got a wide base of programs here. And this is a club that you can sit down together. And if you think about Steve Jobs, and I've heard the quote that I read to you, shortened to say that the customer is not smart enough to know what he wants. This is a group of customers who are smart enough to know what they want. They've seen enough of Rotary and they've got an idea. So that would be a useful process. So let me ask you again, and we can go with microphones here. What elements would your strategic plan have in it to address the weaknesses of this club? What would you do in a strategic plan here?
I'd have a big party. Have a good time.
Yeah, absolutely. What else might you do? Happy hours. Yeah, I like that idea. And I will tell you that it is not vodka that's in my cup.
You could survey the members to find out what social activities they're interested in, or if they just want to continue doing service projects.
Yep. Yeah, I think all of those are great ideas for this club, and they're positive ways to move this club forward. Let me ask you this: what elements could be included to enhance the strengths of the club?
It sounds to me like they could use their committee chairman could begin to train other members of the committee instead of doing it all themselves. There's no plan for continuation.
Right. Yep. And in chat, we've got awards recognition. Look for younger members. I also see from the earlier question, the celebration of service project, family events, classification speeches. What else might they do to enhance those strengths? Any other ideas out there?
They're doing projects with children, but it's just the one member. So it might be worthwhile to recruit a few new committee members for youth projects.
Yeah. Yep. Una?
It seems like, they're gathering 200 community members on this Christmas project or holiday project every year. So why aren't some of those community members who are volunteering joining the club? And, why has the club stayed at the same amount of members when they could be growing through all of these community volunteers?
Yeah. Yep. Juliet says they should pay for members to attend RLI. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Certainly RLI is a great option there, and a mentoring program. I agree with you there as well. I think all of those are great options. So let me give you the sucker punch to these case studies. What if I told you they were both real Rotary clubs? What if I told you they were both the same Rotary club? About 10 to 12 years apart. I gave you the case studies for my Rotary club. I was the president-elect in the first case study. My early career, actually, I was a CPA, and I was facing a situation where the treasurer was a dentist, had not reconciled checking accounts. I literally had, our club president that year could not attend PETS. And so I went in his stead, and I came back from PETS, President-elect Training Seminar. And I looked at the club president and I said, me, you, and another past president who was very important in the club, I said, we need to sit down and talk about long-term planning for the club. And he looked at me and he said, why? And I knew then that we were in for an interesting time. And me, the president that followed me and the president after him sat down together, and we began to map out a 3-year plan to take our club from where it was to be a stronger and better club. And what we agreed to in this process, and this is where I'm talking about where you might not be in a situation that's ready for formal visioning. We never sat down and called it visioning, but we all knew that at the end of 3 years, we had 3 years together to change the culture of our club. We had the chance to sit down and take this club from where it was to where it could be. And so as we sat and talked about this, I told the 2 presidents following me, by the end of my year, you will have financials. You will have checking accounts reconciled. You will have committees in place. They may be 1-person committees, but you'll at least have committees propped up. And the guy that followed me is a guy named Davis Brister, and he was a broadcaster, so he was very outgoing and dynamic. He had actually moved out of that career, but he had been a reporter for a while. And he said, all right, well, in year 2, I'm going to take what you leave me, and I am going to begin to take that, and I'm going to flesh out the committees, and we're going to add committees, or we're going to add projects. We're going to do these other things. And then Elizabeth Van Sant followed him. And by the way, our club has the 2 district governors. Elizabeth, that 3rd president in the row, was the other district governor our club produced. And she said, okay, well, if you guys do these things in the first 2 years, I'm going to take what you leave me and I am going to move it forward by increasing engagement and doing service projects and changing where this club is. And over that time, we built a culture of giving to the Rotary Foundation. We built a culture that attracted younger members. And so our club went from that 65 roughly median age, average age, down to probably a little under 50. And now that has interesting outworkings as well, outcomes as well, in that as the culture of the club changed, we found some of the older members left the club. and younger people came in and took their place, we lost some institutional knowledge over that process. But it was a fascinating process to see what happened. And obviously it worked. The first case study worked, and it was very, very informal. Now the second case study, that's more or less where we are right now. That's where our club is. And I find it fascinating that some of your recommendations are the same things that our club is doing right now. And Elizabeth nor I are really in leadership of the club. We have built that culture in the club, and that we have incoming leaders who do go to RLI. We hosted RLI in our club, and we did it with wine and cheese. We did it on weeknights, about 2 hours at a time. And matter of fact, we're doing virtual RLI now. We did have plans to host about 5 to 8 Rotary Exchange students per year. That was part of our visioning. But COVID obviously whacked that. We were up to about 3 exchange students a year. So when you go back, and if you take a second and read back over these case studies, I do want you to understand that that is the story of what can happen in a club when strategic planning is used. That you can actually take a club that frankly none of us would want to join in that first case study and transform it into a club that's at least doing some pretty good stuff in the second case study. And so let's talk through a few steps, Brian's steps for Rotary strategic planning. And again, I don't warrant that these are all encompassing or that you won't have some that are a little different. These are just my basic rules for strategic planning. Number one, you got to keep it simple. You've got to keep it simple. People are doing this in their spare time, and you've got to avoid corporate speak. We have a past district governor in our district who came out of a corporation and did a strategic plan for the district, and it had section 3.08 and 3.09 and 3.010, and nobody paid attention to it because it was so corporate. It's got to be something that people will pay attention to. Keep it simple, avoid corporate speak, and make it something that people embrace. The second tip I would have for you in strategic planning would be to keep it small. Keep it small to a few points per year. I tell anytime anybody asks me, whether it's a district governor or a club president, it is my firm belief that you can only concentrate on about 2 to 3 things really per year. You can have chairmen that take care of, or chairpersons that take care of various things, but if you're the leader, there are only a handful of things you can concentrate on every single year and really focus on. Keep that strategic plan brief. Don't make it overwhelming. Make sure that you've got people to help drive it, but make sure that you can actually manage the thing. Every now and then I see district governors, and I saw one the other day who was presenting goals to the clubs. And, you know, and I've seen some directors do this too, where they hand out their goals, and it's front and back of a piece of paper, single spaced, you know, in small type. And you can't make anything of that. Keep it small, keep it manageable. The third thing I would suggest to you is keep it in front of you. And by that, I mean, you pay attention to it. And my guess is if we went around this room and we asked everybody, has your club done visioning? A lot of us would say yes. And then if we asked the follow-up question of how has it gone, we would probably get mixed results. And we would have some clubs who took that visioning and put a strategic plan together and managed to deliver on that. And we would have some say, well, it kind of sat on the shelf and collected dust. If you don't keep it in front of you, that plan is not going to come to anything. So the last one is keep it alive. And by that, I mean that the document should be a living document. You can't get wedded to it. You've got to understand that if you're sitting down with a president-elect, president nominee, and president nominee designate, and you're planning for 3 years down the road, things are simply going to change. Make sure it's a living document, and just know that you can change that strategic plan if you need to. So let's go back and talk again for a moment about the power of strategic planning, where we started. Our club, like I said, the culture entirely changed by virtue of a strategic plan. We went from being that club who only gave $1,000 a year to the Rotary Foundation for the Rotarian of the Year. We went to a club that in some years had $500 to $600 per capita in giving to the Rotary Foundation. We went from a club that was not at all involved in district events to sponsoring events at the district conference and helping to set things up and to drive things. The club entirely revolutionized based on the strength of strategic planning and strategic planning of people that came behind us too. It's not like it was only the three of us that did that. And if our club was not dying, and I don't think it was, we had some fairly strong. I meant to point this out too. If you read in the first case study, I mentioned that a past president said that he was looking to get his 30 years in and he was gone. He's still in the club. Not only is he still in the club, he's been on the board. He's been in leadership positions. He has been one of the most vocal advocates for our club because of the changes that came about and the change in that culture. It has been absolutely remarkable to see the way some of our members have adapted due to these changes that were implemented. And so if our club was not dying, it was at least not all that it could be. If our club was not dying, it was on the ropes, and it could have gone either way. And so this process of strategic planning is what revolutionized our club. And I would encourage you again, it doesn't have to be overly formal. It doesn't have to be overly complex. The one thing that it does have to have is action. It's got to have a plan and it's got to have action behind it. We've got the opportunity in front of us, and I think it's wide open. So with that, I've finished my comments. Una, I know you mentioned leaving about 20 minutes for Q&A, something like that, and we're right about on that mark.
I think that sounds great. There's already a question in the chat box from Charity. Charity, do you want to go forward with your question?
We, as you know, we're currently entering goals into my Rotary, and I'm wondering how or if those goals would fit into the strategic plan. Is that a starting point, or how does that all tie together?
When I look at the goals, such as what are in Rotary Club Central, I look at the presidential citation, and that's changing up a little bit, but the presidential citation is earned by strong clubs, and strong clubs earn the presidential citation. If you earn that presidential citation, you become a strong club. So I don't know that I would, those goals tend to be pretty discreet in that, you've got a membership goal, you've got this goal, you've got that goal. All of those goals are out there, and I would consider those more tactical year-to-year type goals than I would strategic overarching 3 to 5 year goals. And so I think, for instance, one thing I would say is I think we should build in our club the culture of earning the presidential citation every year. I think that's an excellent strategic goal. And then all of the other little things fall under that as kind of tactical year-to-year things. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm sorry I'm not showing myself. I'm not up to it tonight.
Oh, no worries.
Thank you.
Thanks, Charity. Linda Spots is asking, how many members was your club in the first scenario?
We, and actually, I didn't mention this in the first scenario. We were down to about 20 members at one point. And we had actually had a membership drive. Actually, the year that I was president-elect, we had a membership drive, and we managed to push that up to about 26 to 28. Mm-hmm. And so that's the starting point of that scenario. So we were down around 20 at one point.
Nice. So Brian, do you think that you kind of differentiated between visioning and strategic planning, and you need the strategic planning to achieve the vision. And then you talked about these tactical things like the action items. How many layers do you think would really be involved in this process? The visioning, the strategic planning, and then the tactical items? How many layers?
Three levels is about where I would keep it. And I guess you could probably add more layers than that if you wanted to. But I think that just gets really complex. And so, we got really lucky when we were first doing our vision and strategic plan. We didn't really call anything by those names. We might have used strategic plan once or twice. But so, for instance, a good example is in my first year, I was going to make sure that the club functioned administratively. So that was my first goal in that first scenario. And then part of that was getting finances done, making sure membership dues. I don't know if I mentioned that in the case or not. We had no clue who owed us what in dues. We had to wipe the slate clean and start over. And so those are the things, those are kind of the tactics that fed into making sure we were solid administratively.
Thank you. John Kleindienst, and I'm not sure if I pronounced it correctly, has a comment about the 300-member club. And John, would you mind just giving a quick overview of how you do it in your club?
Sure, not a problem. We're a little bit different. I'm from the York Downtown Club. Back in about 2013, we started with a strategic plan, and it's a very simple plan. It's a plan on a page where we have our core values, we have our mission, and we have our vision. And then we have 4 goals broken into finance, marketing, committees, and membership. And then we have a bunch of objectives under each one of those, about 5 or so. We've added 2 objectives this year. So it's more of a refreshing change every year. We just finished it. That's why I wanted to sit in and hear your presentation, which has been excellent, by the way. It's an interesting process, but it's not so much about the vision, because we have a good vision. We became more aspirational this year, but it's about the implementation of the objectives, freshening the objectives, and then making sure that someone has the lead on that objective. And as a matter of fact, if the club leadership decides to do so, we're going to have the strategic planning update committee as a standing committee to provide oversight over the implementation. So, thank you.
Yeah, and if I can add on to that, John, I think you're exactly right. And I think the one benefit that a 300-member club has is that it's really difficult to be non-functioning like our 20-member club was. And so I think you're exactly right in that it becomes more aspirational. And I don't think it's so much about having 300 members. I think it's about just being a functioning club where you can begin to hit that aspirational point. Because our club is much more aspirational than it once was, although we're much smaller. And I do think the refreshes are incredibly important. Good comments.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah, I love that plan on a page. That's a good concept. There's a couple of questions. First, Jean Troy, and then Patrick Conlon. Go ahead, Jean.
Sorry, I didn't know you wanted me to talk. So my question is, how do you regroup after COVID?
I think that's a tremendous question, and I think that's one that we're going to be playing out for months here. I think that I think the very first thing that's got to happen is our clubs have to have an honest assessment of where they are right now. And I'll speak for our club. We have not met in person since this all broke. And I am concerned to see what winds up happening. I'm not sure we have a good grasp on who all will be back once COVID is over. And so I think right off the bat, you're going to have to assess honestly where your club is and what you've got to do to move forward from there. But I think being in person and showing some activity right off the bat is going to be just critical.
That's a good place to start. Thanks, Brian. Patrick?
Oh, I was just making a comment. Donna Moyer actually asked, had our club do strategic planning early in the year. And we used the Rotary strategic planning that's on the website. It's very clean. I'm used to corporate strategic plans and they're just massive. But the Rotary one's very clean. It was, we walked through it. We had 8 to 10 people working on it, and people, 2 or 3 would come or go, but they're core about 4 or 5. And we came down and pretty much most of the club agreed with everything, but we shelved it because of COVID. There's just no momentum to get into it. And Donna is now pushing to resurrect it again. So it'd be good to take another good look at it and see I think we ended up with like 5 goals. And the goals actually supported the strategic initiatives. So those are our goals, and the goals were 5-year goals. They'd be 1 year, 2 year, through 5 years. So, but if you haven't seen it, take a look at it. It's a nice flow to it, and I'd follow it. If you've had someone ever done a strategic plan, they can facilitate it. It works really well. It's clean. It'll leave you with a small document.
And thanks, Patrick. And I did put the link to the Rotary. I put it to the action plan, which has some courses in there. You can take the course in the Learning Center. It has some other resources on My Rotary. There's a strategic planning guide on that page that I linked in the comments.
I think
this. Go ahead, Anna Mae.
I think this might be an opportunity. If a club had not done much strategic planning in a long time, I wonder if COVID doesn't cause you to say, well, okay, I think you might get some momentum for planning. What are the lessons we've learned? What do we want to keep that has worked? And what do we need to do to get back going? Or what have we figured out we might be able to give up? Who knows? I think you could ask all of those questions and it might help redirect and energize a club.
Yeah.
I mean, just a comment. It's Juliet, I'm making this comment because of my paid job, where we put off strategic planning, which is a 3-year process, thinking we would wait until the pandemic is over. But, a lot of good articles have come out to say, now's the time. We're in the midst of so much change. Now more than ever, it's critical to start strategically thinking about how the pandemic has impacted your club. What are some good takeaways from the pandemic and how to plan for the future? So even if it's online and maybe you can't do it in person yet, you could still take the strategic planning assessment that's on the Rotary International website and put out a survey monkey to your club members and start the process.
Yeah, and I agree wholeheartedly with not waiting. It's the earlier your members see action, I think the better off you'll be.
And Brian, to the point that you started out with, if we're not building our culture through strategy, the culture is built by default. And COVID cultures could be built right now by default if we don't do something about it and get strategic about our club's culture.
Yeah.
Other questions for Brian? I want to get our money's worth from him now. We've got 10 more minutes.
He's very good.
Brian, any final thoughts for us?
No, I just thank you again for allowing me to do this with you. It was really fascinating to walk through this and to think through this this process and to get a lot of this stuff, frankly, that I've never talked about before down on paper. So I appreciate the opportunity to do that. I really do.
Yeah, great case studies, and thanks for using your own experiences. And I'm sure some clubs can relate to different elements of what you laid out for us. But the point is to build our culture, to use strategic planning as the tool to achieve the culture and the vision that we want in our clubs. reach out to Rotary International for help, as was mentioned in the resources. Reach out to the district for help too. Someone mentioned in the comments to have someone coming in from outside of your club to help and maybe just facilitate the process while you, as your club member, still generate the thought and ideas. Maybe someone else helps move the process along.
Una,
Yeah.
there was a question in the chat. Would Brian be willing to speak to clubs via Zoom?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Una's got my contact information. I'll put my email address in the chat. You
That
guys
would be
can reach
great.
out. If you've got questions that you just want to chat about from all of this, and if you want to email me and tell me I'm wrong and prompt thinking on my half, on my part as well, that's fine. I'm open to that. I like thinking.
Thanks for sharing your email address, Brian. And I encourage you all to take note of that. Let me know if you still need a connection. And John, we'll turn it back over to you.
So I just wanted to kind of wrap it up by saying I have an entire page of notes here, Brian. That was fantastic. I'm very much a keep it simple, stupid kind of guy. And so I love the idea, first of all, that you walked us through a real case study of how you made it happen, and that you kept it simple and small so that we can bite, how to eat an elephant one bite at a time, right? So in this case, that's exactly what you're suggesting, that we keep it as simple so everybody can have buy-in. I just love this presentation. Thank you very much for it. Thanks for taking the time for being here. We are super grateful. Thank you, Una, for bringing them. And yeah, everybody unmute yourself and feel free to give them a round of applause. That's awesome.
Thanks so much, Brian.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I really do.
Awesome.